What happens when property investing goes wrong? If you watch short format content on social media, then you probably could be led to believe that nobody's development projects ever go over time or over budget and no one ever loses any money in property investing. It's all good, but the reality can be really different. And in this episode, we look at why property developments can go wrong. The common mistakes that investors and developers make, how to avoid those, and what happens if your deal does start to go sideways. How can you rescue that? So join us for this in-depth discussion on why property investing, why property developing goes wrong, how to avoid the mistakes, what to do if it starts to go wrong, and how to rescue your deal. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hey, this is Ant from YPN. I'm joined today, I hope, by Dave Wigram, good friend of YPN's. He looked like he was having a brief technical challenge there. So Dave, hopefully you're still with me.
I am, yeah.
Okay, great. So Dave, how ironic. Today we're talking about when property investing goes wrong. Perhaps we should be talking about when technology goes wrong. No,
well, because that's every day of my life, Ant. So, I just... that'd be a 5-hour episode. No, we'll stick to the property.
We are only 5.5 years into doing these kind of online calls, so you can be forgiven for not quite being there with it yet. So, okay. So today's topic, when property investing goes wrong, it's more about the lessons learned, the mistakes that we see people make along the way, and you and I are both strong advocates for the fact that this side of the business doesn't really get spoken about enough. So. You were saying before we came online, hey, on social media, it looks like everybody else is smashing it. Everybody else's deals come in on time, on budget, on plan, and it never goes wrong.
Yeah.
That's not really how it works, is it? So
it's just not reality, right? And I think we all know on a base level that social media isn't real, but somehow when we look at it, you do build this feeling that it is all, that's how the world is. It's subconscious feeling. And the fact is, I'm in a privileged position that I've mentored a lot of people. I actually, on the financial stuff I do, I get to see literally the pennies spent and the problems happening for hundreds of millions of pounds of property businesses. I'm in such a privileged position to know that this thing of things going wrong and not working out to plan is so normal. It's just happening everywhere all the time, because unfortunately property is a complex industry. There's a lot going on, a lot of different facets you've got to deal with, and lots that changes. Like, you set out to do a deal, you think you know what the bank's going to be happy with, you think you know what planning's going to be happy with, or building control, but actually as it evolves, things come up, banks change their minds, interest rates shift, suddenly you find something in the building that it wasn't as expected. This is literally normal. And yes, the end result is that things might not go as well. And the problem is there's an element of shame with this. No one's talking about it. No one mentions it on their posts. So therefore, when it happens to you, you don't want to talk about it to anyone. And there's this moment where you just feel really bad, like you're really crap, like you're not good enough. And the problem is, that moment, first of all, makes your life feel really bad. And it also makes you start to make different decisions. And one of the big decisions we often see, and I think me and Jackie and that we're all about focus, and we're all about people kind of getting down to one thing and then replicating it. The problem is that if you start to feel shame and worry about you yourself and it not being good enough, one of the first things people do is start looking at all the other models out there and all the other people who are doing things. And they go, I know, the problem is my model's not right. This isn't going to work. I should do that one. And it actually sets you back massively, because if you keep flipping like that, you'll never get to where you want. But you also have that shame. It just makes life worse, and you start making weird decisions. Like maybe you've got investors and you don't tell them, or you don't get honest about it, or you don't tackle something head on because you start to bury your head. There's so many reactions us as humans can have that create a negative result. But if we didn't have that feeling of shame and it was all very open, honestly, everyone's life would be better. You'd be happier because you just know it's normal, and you take better action off the other side.
Okay, well, here we are to talk about it. To go, what's the phrase? Open kimono, isn't it? Bare all, and talk about when things don't go according to plan, and be honest about that. And I know you're going to talk through one of your projects which didn't quite go as you would have hoped it would have gone, and then we're going to talk about maybe some of the common things that property investors get wrong, different stages, and the lessons learned. These are the really important bits. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this, if you're reading this, wherever you might be consuming this content, it's really important that you learn from the mistakes that we and others have made, so you don't go out and make the same ones yourself. You can go out and make a whole raft of new ones, maybe, but hopefully not. So, okay, so Dave, tell us about your deal, because you were really quite kind to send across two, which, on the face of it, didn't look wildly different, and yet the kind of net results for them were quite different. So, should we start with when it goes well?
When it goes well. So are you in terms of when it goes well, I feel like we obviously set out to achieve a result. And for me, when it goes well, might well and still incorporate a load of things going wrong. And I think that's what's been fascinating about our journey and my experience, is that I look at the ones that gone well and I can still look at them and go, yeah, but I still didn't anticipate that. That still went wrong. The bank still messed me around on that. It just so happens that when I got to the other side, the fates aligned and I got to roughly the result I was looking for. So one of the things I sent across to you was two deals side by side. It was a very formative time for us because we were stepping up into new models. We were moving from the single let into the bigger blocks of flats was our decision. And we actually went out there, and at the one moment in time when we were stepping up, we chose 3 different types of blocks of flats without realizing just how different they were. At the time, to us, it was just like, yeah, we're going into blocks of flats. We've got 3 of them. The problem was that they were very different levels, I'd say, different levels of blocks of flats. So the 3 that we did, one was just a simple, it was already floor flats. All the building control was signed off. Everything was correct in place already. All we were doing was a heavy refurb, so just changing everything inside, and we were adding 2 bedrooms. So 2 of the flats were 1 beds. We changed them to 2 beds. Very simple, 1 wall, straightforward. And in theory, it was the most simple of the 3 because we didn't have to do anything with utilities, we didn't have to do anything with planning, and really very little with building control as well. So that was the simplest. On the most complex end, we actually had one that was a full, basically, conversion. Although at the time we weren't really aware of just what that meant, but it was a shop on the ground floor. It already had 2 flats above it, so a shop with 2 flats in existence, and we were converting the shop into, at the beginning, it was 1 flat, and then later down the line, it turned into 2 flats actually. So yeah, it was 2 blocks of flats in our mind, but one was a massive conversion, the other was just simply 4 flats. And what was super interesting was we got to the other side of this and be able to look back and say, what were the learnings and which one went better, right? And compared to what we thought up front, obviously we didn't take on that conversion without seeing huge profits, right? We were looking at the numbers up front going, great, once we spend this much money, we're going to see a huge profit and we'll get all our money out of that deal and it was going to look really good. And on the block of 4 that were already in existence, it was an average deal. It was good, it's good numbers, good returns, and but it wasn't anything mind-blowing. It was just a nice deal. And it was when we got to the other side that we're looking at them, and actually the simplest one, the block of 4 that just went straight through, it did have problems, but it basically hit the numbers and it hit us nice returns. And I seem to remember we basically made about 80 grand of profit on the deal itself in terms of uplift. I think we were in for about 430 grand of something of costs. And then the end result was a revaluation at 515. We released, we left some money in the deal. We left 60 grand in the deal, but that money was returning well, and it was returning at 25% returns, which is a very good deal for us, just very straightforward, based on the rents. And it just hit all the nice, simple markers. And the project itself, we did have problems with the builders. We went through 3 builders on that project, even on the simple one. But the end result was hitting pretty much what we wanted. And in terms of stress levels, it wasn't that stressful. It was, it was okay. I could deal with all the problems when they came. When a builder was letting us down, it just that strain of kind of like dealing with the relationship. how do you get him off the deal with the least money loss possible? How do you get the next builder on? So I'm very proud of how we managed it and the challenges that incurred. But because the challenges were simpler, we were able to bring it through to quite a good conclusion. So that was the easy one that went well. But like, you look at the numbers, if I present that to anyone, you know, a client or you guys or on any magazine, you just show the numbers without the background, it looks like a great deal. It looks like it was easy. Anyone should do blocks of flats. That'd be easy. But there were so many small learnings even in that one. Like we with the conversion of the 2 flats where we turned them from 1 beds to 2 beds, we got to our refinance and we were on a bridge on it. We got to the refinance, and it was at that point the bank turned around, and it was the bank's lawyers, who know nothing about anything, turned around and goes, "Where's your planning for this?" And we turned back to them going, "Sorry, but if you know anything about property, you obviously don't need planning for changing a 1 bed to a 2 bed. That is literally, come on, you're a property specialist bank. You should know this stuff." They actually insisted that we get a CLU, on the basis of the current layout. And their rationale was completely flawed. It was some weird thing that they said, oh, it could constitute a change of use due to the increase in occupancy. And I'm sitting there thinking, do you think this is an HMO? Like, this is not, I'm not turning it from a 5 bed to a 7 bed HMO here. There's no planning shift, but they don't know what they're talking about. So it cost us 2 months of time on a bridge, you know, and we lost us some money, but it was all solvable. So that was one that went great. That's a good project. And so then on the other side, we have what I would say is the biggest university degree we've ever had in property, and it's definitely been one I've called upon for years since, in terms of understanding the best way to manage properties, because I feel like we encountered every problem under the sun on our conversion project, and that's the one that it was just like, it was blow after blow after blow of what else can go wrong, that kind of feeling, and a big part of that is because it was obviously much more complex, but we weren't ready for that, how much could go wrong, because again, you look at the industry, you talk to the people, you talk to the planning consultants, you talk to all of these various, you see these social media posts, the mentors, and everyone's just like, yeah, conversion, no worries. It's just as easy as a refurb. It's, you know, just a few more elements. Just get the right professionals in place, and you'll be fine. That was the gusto with which we went at it, and the truth is a very different fact.
That's how I tackled a couple of conversion projects I did as well. You know, with that confidence and gusto that you mentioned, you know, hey, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing. I did not know what I was doing. And day one on the build, or even before that became very obvious to everybody, especially myself. So yeah, and I think that's everyone. What was different? Yeah. So what was different, and what went wrong on this one, which, you know, in hindsight, you think, do you know what, that's just a lack of knowledge, or, you know, or, do you know what, completely beyond my control, I definitely couldn't have foreseen that. So what was it specifically that went wrong here?
So I guess there's quite a few different elements. So I'm going to start with the professionals. So I think one of the biggest weaknesses we had approaching that project was an innate trust in the professionals around us to do their job to that kind of shiny, glossy quality that you just assume everyone is, you know. They're a great planning consultant, so clearly they're going to do their job perfectly, and I don't need to necessarily micromanage them, right? So a sense of delegating out these responsibilities to my professionals, structural engineer, planning consultant, whomever, and just then letting them get on with it, and then coming back to it, you know, at the point that I kind of thought it should all be done. And I would say it was a huge learning that really your job as the developer, as the person who's overseeing the project, your job is actually to be the jack of all trades that does really understand each of the elements of your professionals. There's no abdication of understanding as the developer. And if you abdicate the understanding of what's going on, you are ready for the pit of hell. You're ready to end up at a point where you're like, what? How did that go wrong? What happened there? And like for us, we ended up, it was supposed to be a really simple CLU, permitted development application on our planning stuff. And honestly, instead of just a 2-month whatever process, we didn't get our planning on that building until 5-6 months down the line, because I did not check in enough on my planning consultant. I did not understand where the problems could be, and I was not making sure. So when my professional said to me, yeah, don't worry, it's all in hand, but without any context, I just believed them. I was just like, yeah, great, fine, good. I didn't know what all in hand truly meant. I didn't actually check to say, okay, so when an application goes in, it has to be validated. Has this been validated? So I wasn't asking the right questions. And the truth is the professionals hadn't necessarily checked that it had been validated and accepted. And then they weren't checking in to see that it was going through due process. And we actually ended up with an application that wasn't validated. And at week 7, expecting our week 8 to have our prior approval just approved, it actually hadn't even started. Like, not at all. And it turned out it was because it had ended up on the wrong desk with the wrong person. Actually, it was the wrong application altogether because the professional in this case had made a mistake. Now, I don't necessarily blame them. They have a lot on. You know, it's very easy to make mistakes, but it's on me as the developer to really kind of be checking and making sure I understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and to be asking those questions. And I think that happened quite a few times with my professionals throughout.
I remember being in probably both of our conversions, but certainly one of them, bigger deals, and using the phrase, "Whoever makes the mistake here, I pick up the bill," and and it was absolutely the case. Our architect got things wrong at, specifying, putting out to tender. And there was an additional £70,000 cost there, and he definitely wasn't going to pay it.
No.
It was us. So, and that's really difficult because you are trusting a professional to do it, but at the same, and you have to delegate. You can't do the planning application yourself. You can't do the architect's drawings, but at the same time, you're putting your trust in someone who, sure, as you rightly say, mistakes happen, and me, or in this case you, pay the bill. So
I think, and that is the understanding, and I think that's where I came at it from the wrong angle. You have to realize that humans are humans. They don't necessarily, they're not invested in the same way you are, and any of these professionals can get it wrong and can tell you the wrong things even, and it's actually your responsibility as the project developer, the person who the buck stops with you, to truly get in there and get into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty and understand what their job is and understand what they're really trying to achieve. And especially nowadays, it's easier than ever with ChatGPT to get a simple understanding of what happens. Even back when I was working on this, I didn't have that tool available, but I just had to ask them and try and get to the bottom of it with questions. But it's your job to make sure that it is definitely going to plan, things are being ticked off, and it is to interrogate the detail, because otherwise, you're the one who pays, or your investors. Yeah.
So some problems from the outset there. I'm going to imagine that the kind of build itself didn't go exactly according to plan. So.
I'll give you some examples. So another one was we trusted building control. I had a simple, naive belief that building control knew what they were talking about, and we did not go to private building control. We went to local authority. Again, another naive belief that, I don't go to local authority. They'll probably be the most authoritative and understand what's going on. I had a really nice building control officer come on, and I asked him to confirm everything, like, what do I need to do in terms of fire protections between the flats? What do I need to do in terms of acoustics? All of this. And he walked around this building and gave me every bit of detail you could want. It was fantastic. Me, the builder, the building control man, he was like, for fire, do this, for acoustics, do that, and it'll all be fine. It wasn't until I'd already basically finished a flat. One of the flats was finished. It was one of the two top floor flats. And I got to that point of bringing around, very proud, bringing around some other developer friends of mine. They'd visited Margate, shown them around the building, took them in there, and they turned around to me and said, what have you done about acoustics? What have you got here? Have you done your ceilings? And I was like, I've just done what I was told, did what building control told me to do. And they said, so you've just left it as what? You put a full ceiling, the ceiling what? I said, no, just left it how it was, just one ceiling straight on the job. It's just exactly what it was. The guy said it was going to be fine. And this developer friend flagged it and just said, I think that's wrong. I think you should go and speak to my acoustic engineer. Here you go. And yes, 100%, the building control officer had just just told me lies. Like he thought he knew what he was talking about. He didn't do it on purpose, but I needed an acoustic engineer. Guy comes in. And yes, I had to do a load of work. I had to drop ceilings. I had to create gaps in my walls between the flat and the communal area. All retrospective, because I basically finished that flat. And through the rest of the building, it just added a load of cost that I wasn't anticipating. Again, because I trusted that this building control man knew what he was talking about, and I didn't necessarily have the right professionals on board in that respect to make sure I was doing it right.
Well, I mean, you can be forgiven for thinking that these were the people in the most authority. It's in the name, isn't it? It's the local authority is in the name. And, but, you know, an expensive lesson, and one that, you know, again, the really difficult bit is that I think we're all happy to put our hand up when we've made a mistake. It's really difficult when it's someone else's mistake. That's the difficult one to swallow, because they're not going to pick up the tab for your additional build costs, are they? They've advised you wrong. So.
And that was a big learning around that, was this feeling of like, actually no one picks up the tab, and there's no, like the building, particularly building control, they literally have nothing you can take against them. If they give you wrong advice, it's very, very difficult to go back and, you know, sue them for it or whatever. It really just is, you've got to get it right. And that's difficult, because the first time you do something, you're not going to get it right. And I think that's really what this comes down to. You have to be ready to accept that, yes, things will go wrong, and the job of you as a developer is to learn from them and to problem solve and pivot through it and just come out the other side as unscathed as possible. And unfortunately, because it's never talked about, everyone thinks that if it goes wrong for them, they're awful and it's all their fault. But actually, no, that's what happens to everyone. That is literally the nature of doing something new. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to trip up. You know, when you're first learning something, you don't know everything. So that's okay. That's okay. Just don't overexpose yourself and do 3 of them at the same time. You know.
I was really curious to ask as well that with you know, these are steep learning curves. These are difficult and expensive lessons, particularly when you go up the kind of deal chain and you're not doing a one flat in one building anymore. Which if you go over budget, it might be $5,000, which hopefully we can swallow.
Yeah.
If it's hey, I'm going to be absolutely honest here. Okay, on my biggest conversion project, we went £400,000 over budget.
Yeah.
You know? That's a painful number.
Yeah.
It's a painful number. But so I'm really interested to know, so with this one, did that change your focus? Did you say, do you know what, maybe that isn't for me? Maybe conversions aren't for me. I know what I'm doing with a block of flats. Maybe conversions aren't for me. Or did you take that and say, well, these are all learning lessons. These are painful and expensive lessons, but lessons. And so I now know that we won't do that again, and to move forward with knowledge confidence? Or did you kind of switch and say, well, actually, let's stick with what we know?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because actually I think there's, for everyone, there's this moment of decision when things have gone wrong. And the moment of decision is, do I keep going with the knowledge I've learned and then make it better next time? Or do I pivot and shift entirely? And for us, we were lucky enough in a way to have these 3 different projects, 3 different levels, and we were able to look at them all in hindsight and make a decision moving forward to say, where did we enjoy the process the most? And we realized that for us, Jackie and me, the stress of dealing with third parties like planning and building control and these third parties you have to kind of comply with, that stress was not something we enjoyed, and it wasn't kind of a thrilling stress. It was very much a kind of why did we do this kind of stress. And when we looked at the projects we'd done, the simplest one, the block of flats without any planning and with minimal to no building control, it didn't have any utilities that had to be upgraded. It was the most enjoyable of the 3, and yet it still got to a really good result, but less returns than you would say achieve on a commercial conversion when you look at it on paper. And so yes, we did say to ourselves at that point, actually, I don't want that in my life. I didn't enjoy it. I don't want to go on and do the next one and learn from it, because I know I'm going to still be in that position of lack of power, lack of control, dealing with professionals who might let me down, and planning who are just they're out. It feels like they're out to kill you, to get you sometimes, doesn't it? They just don't care about you. We didn't enjoy that, so we decided in our model, because of our risk profile, to mitigate all of those variables as much as possible, so that when we go to our investors, we're able to say, these are the challenges that you can have in property, and we've basically gone through each of the challenges and we've chosen to mitigate them by selecting our model more clearly. So our model was very easy to sell to our investors from that moment forward. We said, like, because we aren't doing anything that requires planning, because we aren't doing anything that requires a utility upgrade, we're removing all of these variables that could go wrong, making it a more robust, more reliable deal to be done. It still has problems, and actually I'll tell you about another problem on our best deal ever. It still has problems, but it's at least making it slightly less risky.
Yeah, that's an interesting, that kind of risk mitigation, and I definitely found as well, I didn't really like operating in that space. That, you know, that kind of I liked it when I could walk around with the builder and we could decide what was going to happen. I didn't really like it when the architect had to submit, you know, drawings, and then there was a QS on the other side, and it felt like a job. It felt like a corporate job, which was definitely something I didn't want and probably would be really bad at. So, so when you, I think it's really great that you share that we're able to talk very candidly about when things don't go according to plan. So I'm interested to hear from the many, many people that you've kind of mentored, and the hundreds of millions of pounds worth of deals that you've seen kind of coming across your desk and advising on. We're going to talk about a lot of those lessons. I was interested to know if one of those lessons is, when property doesn't go swimmingly well, do a lot of people pivot at that point and go, this wasn't that much fun. I didn't like serviced accommodation, and so I'll do HMOs, and that was hard, so now I'm going to do lots of flats. And do you see that happen a lot?
I see that happen a lot, and I think this is the most important differential, is that when we chose what we were going to do and weren't going to do, we kept it. We kept most of the model. We were just moving ahead. And for us, the pivot was actually not a change. It was a reduction of scope within the same knowledge and learning. So all of our learnings were relevant. Everything was still being used. It's just a choice of, actually, I've chosen, I know if I take on a project that has a utility upgrade, I know what I'm getting into now, and therefore I avoid it at all costs. And if I choose to do it, I know exactly what I'm taking on. So it was very much not a shift. It was just a reduction and a choice, a focus. Most people are exactly what you just said, Anne. They have a bad month, something all goes wrong, and they come through just going, do you know what? These HMOs, they're really messing with me. I don't like the idea of them, like, everything that can go wrong with the planning or whatever. So do you know what I've decided? I'm not going to do HMOs. I'm going to do planning gain on land. I'm like, but you don't know what's going to go wrong with that. Like, I'm going to do lease options.
No common elements whatsoever across the things.
No common, yes. All your learnings gone. You know, and that's, I think the most important thing to know is that when it doesn't go to plan, when it doesn't go well, the job is to work out how you can do it better next time. That's the job, not to say, therefore, I don't want to do that anymore and go to something completely different. So when we said we want to, shift to focus in on these simpler blocks, it was because we decided, how can we basically do it better next time? We'll do it better by doing the same type of thing. We are growing into blocks of flats, but we are just limiting the variables because we know it will get a more robust model. That made so much sense, and we'd had so many learnings from it that were implemented. But if you jump to another model, do you know what? You just go back to square one, and you're going to have another year probably of things going wrong for you.
I guess it's like being at university studying physics, having a bad exam, and then switching to romantic poetry.
Exactly.
Or something like that. It's like no common denominators whatsoever. Not that I know anything about either of those subjects. But okay, so the other common mistakes that we make as property investors, but we don't talk about enough. What do you think are the kind of
I got you.
The common themes.
Okay, so first of all, I think up front, no one gives enough contingency. So especially if it's your first time doing a model, that very first time, never ever view your contingency as, free money. I actually remember very, very clearly looking at my deal analysis for the one that went very badly wrong. And the one that went very badly wrong, by the way, we ended up, I think we spent about 600K and our end valuation was 580. So we were minus 20 in terms of actual profit on day one. We still own the block. It makes us really good cash flow now, and we just made it work for us over the long term, and we found a way to pivot that particular deal into something that worked for us. But yeah, it was devastating at the time, and we had 167 grand left in instead of basically all money out. It had to be worked out. So I remember looking at the analysis and saying 20% contingency. Never am I going to spend that. My professionals tell me it's going to be this much, I've allowed this much. I was like, yeah, that's basically going to be free money at the other side. And actually that all got eaten up and taken way beyond that. But I see people analysing deals, especially stuff they've never even really done before, and they're putting 5-10% contingency. And I'm just thinking, no, that's not going to work. Not the first time, especially. You've got to have done a few before you can go down to a 10% or even 5% contingency, because you've got to know what you're doing. You know where it can go wrong. And to this day, I always have 20% contingency across the board. I want that allowance for extra cost, and I know that it's probably going to be spent somewhere in the deal from beginning to end. You just don't know where it's going to go. That's all. So contingency is a big one.
So
Yeah.
is there a knock on from that? Is there, by not allowing enough for a contingency, is there a knock on in terms of then paying too much for the property?
Yeah, because I think they want to make the deal work, and because you want to make the deal work, you drop your contingency, or you just don't allow it at all, and you think your numbers are good enough, so your deal stacks up, but it's not going to stack up, because once you've spent the contingency, you spend this money, your returns are getting lower, you're leaving more money in the deal, and you haven't got a plan for it. So you think it's going to be one deal, and it ends up being a much worse deal. And it could have been avoided if you just accepted that you don't know what you don't know yet. You're going to spend more money than you think, so just put the contingency in there, and then just assume it's going to get spent, right? Simple. And then the deal will probably end up much closer to what you think it is day one. And you're right, and the answer is if it doesn't stack with the 20% contingency, that if you can't get it accepted, you just got to lower the offer to it's a lower price, asking price, offer price, and if they don't accept it, that's fine, because if you go up with your price, your deal's not going to work. Is this belief that I don't need a contingency, I'm probably not going to spend that money, I think I know I've got all the numbers sorted, and that it's just not true.
Do you think another reason why that happens is people find a deal and they kind of get emotionally attached to that deal as well? That this is close, this is nearly it. I can kind of fudge the numbers a little bit because another one may not come along. This might be the only unicorn. So
yeah, I think that you're 100% right on that. There's a sense of worried that you've found it, and if you don't do this one, when's the next one going to be? I think there's got to be a direct mindset shift, and I do find this even with some of our more experienced clients that we work with. I still have to have this chat with them, where I'm just like, it's not about trying to make one or two deals work and just putting your efforts into those one or two. It's actually about just having a very quick, easy way to get loads of offers in on loads of properties, so that whatever happens, you've got loads and loads of options out there, and it's the best deals that are the ones that you end up doing. Because if you're focusing on 2 or 3 properties and trying to fudge the figures to make them work, then you've only got 2 or 3 irons in the fire. But if you've got 20 to 30 properties where you've got much lower offers in, chances are one of those will pay off, and you're going to end up with a really fantastic deal where the numbers really do stack. So it's actually about volume of offers at the right price, rather than about focusing in and just trying to find the few unicorns that really work. The unicorn comes from having loads of offers out there.
Okay, great advice. And also, I guess, following up as well, a no now may not be a no in 6 months' time or 8 months' time or even a year. And I think I've been guilty of that before, where, it's a no, and so, okay, well, I'll move it to the bin. And actually, some 8 months down the line, still hasn't sold, but someone else is buying it now because I didn't do my job properly.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. The best deals come from following up. That follow-up process, having a nice pipeline where every deal that you've ever put an offer in on is something you're following up every single month and checking in. that's when they suddenly come back and go, yeah, it's just fallen out of bed. They're ready to accept it. And you can actually get it usually often less than you were planning to at that moment. So in our process, we'll usually be at a point where we haven't even gotten to our final offer price. And then it's very clear they're not going to go for it. So we don't go up to there. And then, 3 months later, they still haven't sold, and they're willing to come down to where we're at. Even it's lower than we would have gone to, just because they're getting motivated. So it's all about the seller's motivation and being there at the right moment when it changes. And the best moment when it changes is when they've gone through a 3 to 4 month sales process. It falls out of bed, and they're despairing, and you swoop in. You swoop in as the savior, and they're willing to just sell it to you at the right price because they're ready to get their money.
Okay, great advice here. So, and what else do we property investors get wrong? And because I think I've made every mistake in the book, I'm sure I have. But they're common themes. I'm thinking about, you said at the start, when things aren't going well, that miscommunication, that lack of communication to, if you've got private investors or even a bank or whatever, but certainly with private investors, not keeping them informed, not telling them when things don't go exactly according to plan. It's really easy to be an ostrich, isn't it? Bury your head in the sand. I won't talk to anybody because that's a difficult conversation. And then that relationship goes really, really bad. I guess you've seen that happen.
I've seen it happen really badly. And I think you've nailed on the head again. Obviously, we both made all the mistakes. And it's so simple when it comes to working with other people's money. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on. Communication is the key to a successful relationship. And if you don't communicate, you basically trigger every fear they can possibly have of, that's it, I've lost my money, and this guy's going to screw me over. Every subconscious fear they have about handing over 50, 100, 200K to someone starts getting triggered, and the relationship nosedives from that moment. You lose all ability to keep them satisfied and happy. You lose the ability to kind of come to good compromises because actually they start to stop trusting you and they start to stop believing you. And that's the moment you get to a point where they're going to start maybe taking legal action against you or taking much harder routes that are not nice, and starting to manipulate the situation because they're scared you're actually going to screw them over. And they are therefore almost trying to attack first to try and make sure that they come out on top. The worst scenarios I've ever seen are always down to one thing, and it's the investor not communicating the problem and not communicating regularly and not helping the investor to understand what they're doing to solve the problem. And I think it also forces you into a position, if you know that you're going to communicate with the investor, you know that you've got to go to them and you say, here's the problem and here's what I'm doing about it. And it forces you to go through that process of then like working out your options and working out the future, where the worst case is an investor is a developer like us, like not burying their head in the sands from their own problems as well, just to think, oh, I'm sure it'll work out, I'd rather not look at this at all. So it does force you to do that as well, to actually say, I know I've got a problem here and I know I'm going to have to pay that person back and it's going to be delayed, but how am I going to deal with that? And you have to then present the solution to them at the same time. So that's my approach, would be to say, as soon as there's a problem, you don't have to do it the next day. I would never send an investor a problem without a solution, or at least without a proposed solution. That's also a recipe for causing, distrust or lack of faith. And I would say the job is, within a sensible period of time from when the problem occurs, to proactively tell them what the problem is, tell them what the impact is on them, and to tell them what you're doing about it. And even if that means a delay in them repayment, you say, I'm really sorry, it's just going to be delayed. I'm doing everything I can. It's going to be, 2 months later than planned. Here's everything I'm doing about it. And, fingers crossed we can do it a bit earlier if A, B, or C works out for me. And then they feel great. They just feel like you're all over it. And they're actually usually, in most cases, going to be forgiving, and they're going to actually support you through it, as opposed to attacking you back.
I guess as well, most of these people are business people or fairly commercially minded. They are aware that not everything goes to plan every moment of the day.
Yeah.
And so maybe they're expecting some speed bumps. They don't know exactly what the speed bumps are going to be, but they're not surprised when things have a small delay or there's a small hiccup. And I don't know, I've been around the kind of property education circuit for a long time now, and The people I have the least amount of trust in are the people who suggest that their deals never go wrong, or there's never a problem, or things don't get delayed, or things don't go over budget, because it's just not real. It's just not real. So, so when you're sitting down with people who are quite new, maybe they're just starting to work with you now. What are the mistakes that they have made up to date, or they're just about to make, that you're able to say, right, let's not do that, don't do that. I'm thinking maybe about an example being someone choosing a strategy which probably isn't aligned with their skill sets and resources, or even their end goals, because someone else has made it look really cool and exciting. I'm just thinking at that early stage, because we'll have people who are watching this, who, and listening to this and reading it, who might be about to make their first or second or third move in property, and how can we help them stop making these common mistakes?
Well, I think one of the ones, the most obvious one, is something that we all really know, and it is so simple. Don't run before you can walk. It is as basic as that. If you're just getting into property, job number one is to start working out the foundations. Make sure you understand how the banks are working on the simple stuff. Make sure you understand how a simple refurb works. Make sure you can manage a builder on a simple project. If you think you're going to be able to come to property, maybe do one tiny refurb and then jump into a huge commercial conversion of 11 units, then it's a recipe for disaster. You haven't built up the requisite skill set required to allow you to successfully and safely manage that bigger model, because it isn't something, unless you've got prior experience of huge project management of builds that you can bring to the table. It's not something that just comes naturally to you. You've got to understand where the danger points are, and what can go wrong before you can successfully manage something like that. So it is a simple look. Just don't just listen to the hype and listen to someone say, but this is the model for you, you should do it, and then go and do some big version of it. If you want to do a serviced accommodation, don't jump into a block of 4 or 6 serviced accommodation in one area. Just do one simple one, make sure it really works and understand the nuance, and then maybe do 2 in one block. It's just being very careful with how you progress your growth. I think that's the most important thing. And do you know what? That requires patience, because most people getting into property have this desire, they're there to get to cash flow quickly. They want to get out of their job. They want to do this or that. And as soon as you focus on the desire to grow quickly, to get to your end result fast, over and above just a sense of, well, this is the sensible approach, you start making stupid decisions, and you start just taking on stuff that is too risky for you and is most likely going to set you back into a position where you're in a worse place than you were before, because you've got lots of headaches, but you don't necessarily have the cash flow. So that would be the most obvious one that I would say. Anything you want to add to that, Ant?
I guess I was thinking as well that our level of comfort varies as well, depending where we've come from. So, I used to work for a guy years ago who made enormous amounts of money in one business, and then kind of switched to property investing. I mean, his business, he was selling from like 20 million, plus, and then he moved to property investing. So it would have been entirely inappropriate for him just to go out and do 1-bed flats,
Absolutely.
Conversions. And he had a huge network and a skill set, could manage people, and so he went almost straight into those kind of bigger developments, and that was absolutely right and appropriate for him.
You're right.
But if someone's come from, hey, let's take an example. We talked about the local authority earlier on, didn't we? If someone's just worked in a sort of local government job, local authority, or in the state sector, or whatever it might be, doing one job, maybe doing it really well, but quite without the need to kind of learn outside of that, to take those big steps up would be crazy. They're just not used to. They don't have that entrepreneurial kind of like, automatic kind of managing of risk and taking risk on, and resources behind them. So I guess there's horses for courses. There's the right entry level deal for depending where you've come from. And so I've seen people make that mistake. They've kind of looked at, hey, that guy's just building 100 flats, but that guy's like got 10 million quid in cash behind him. He's He's got multiple businesses experience, so he might not have done that before, but he's got great grounding in project management or whatever it might be. I guess I see that kind of mismatch sometimes. I don't know if that resonates as well.
100%, and because one of our things we often do for people up front when they come to work with us is the business model selector, is looking at how do you choose what business model is right for you, which property option is the right one for you, and it's obviously there's so many different aspects that lead into that, from like how much cash flow it makes, how much capital you have available, but one of the most important ones in deciding it is your previous experience or other skill sets that are going to support you in this model. And some people come along and they've never done any property, but they do have the experience, the project management experience or the trade experience or whatever it is that means that, yes, actually stepping straight into something a bit bigger is the right move and there's going to be no problem. Because, if you're a builder who has already done big build projects as a builder, then of course coming in and maybe doing a commercial conversion could be right for you straight away, because you actually might have done that before in previous history, even if you've never done it for yourself as the investor. So it limits a lot of the problems. So I totally agree that resonates massively. Just choosing what's right for you and your experience and your skill set is key.
I'm going to use an extreme example, if that's okay now, and I don't know if this resonates, but this is a few years ago, I was at Property Investor Show in Excel, and I was chatting to a woman we had a stand there, and I think she had 3 properties in London, and she told me that she was kind of subsidising those by about £1,000 a month. She was topping up the rent that people were paying in order to cover the mortgages.
Wow.
Across those 3 properties, and she was putting like 50 or 60 grand in terms of deposits into each one, and this was a few years ago, so that's going to be more than that now. And she was about to buy property number 4, and it was the same type of property, and what she really wanted to do was to create cash flow to leave her job. And couldn't see that every single one of these projects was just taken her further and further away from the goal, from that end goal. And that's an extreme example, but I do think there are maybe people out there who are... You and Jackie talk a lot about focus, and within that, focusing on the end goal and then focusing on building the business that gets you towards it. I do see that there's a lot of people who don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that's a lot of the work that you do with people at the outset. I don't know if when you first meet people, you have to kind of realign that, if people take more realignment than we might imagine.
Yeah, 100%. It is a big a shock for a lot of people as to what is really going to happen, and it does take quite a bit of realignment to get them to realize that the thought they thought would be a good route to getting to their goal is definitely not going to get them there. So there is quite a bit of realignment. I'd say definitely I've seen a good example of similar to what you described there, just a bit more of someone further down the line is someone who is either trying to decide between doing rent to rents versus property management, lettings management, as it were. And they wanted this. They also owned a portfolio, but they were wanting to get more cash flow. The biggest thing was, I need more cash flow. Just need to build that cash flow. And they decided that property management was the quickest way. But then they kept, every time they spoke to a landlord, some reason just kept doing rent to rents instead of property management. And I'd sit on a call with them. I'd say, okay, so for this person, you pushed them towards the rent to rent. Okay, I get it. But what's the cash flow situation? And they'd say, oh, well, we're going to have to put 10K in to get it sorted, get it up and running. And I was like, okay.
Stop saying rent to rent.
So, and this is the thing, this person, as an example, was basically seeing that this model of rent to rent for them was more profitable in the long run. And it suited their temperament to go, I'm looking for a great profit. I'm going to make more money every month in the end. And even though I have to put money in, I'll make that back. But they weren't actually making profit for 18 months. But they kept telling me, but I need cash flow now. I said, so it was this real disconnect between the desire for the deals to be great and profitable versus actually if they just made less profit, they would achieve their goal sooner, which was I need cash flow now. And if I just took that property on as a management only property, I'd be making immediately £200, £300 a month cash flow from it. and that would start solving my problem. And they couldn't see that. It kept happening. It kept coming back, and it took months and months before they clocked it. But it's,
I would love to have listened into those to those calls, and as soon as they say rent to rent, you're just pressing the hang up button.
No, not again.
You've done it again.
Yeah. And do you know what? I'm aware of time here, and there is one other thing I really wanted to say in terms of problems of people getting wrong, which I see all the time, and I've done it several times, but I just think it's really important to say is builders are one of the biggest risks in this business, full stop. Even great builders can let you down because they mismanage their stuff, they mismanage their teams, and they were great for a year, and then the next year they just fall apart. So management of risk for me is in property a very big matter of managing your builder exposure and how you manage your builders. And there's two things I just think everyone should be doing is number one is, especially if you don't know the builder well, but even further down the line once you work with them a lot, do not overexpose to one builder. So don't have every one of your projects with one build team, especially if you haven't worked with them much before. It's over and over again, I've seen it as a recipe for disaster. They were great this year, they were great last year, and then suddenly you've got 4 projects with one builder and they fall apart and it all stops, and your risk is huge at that point, especially if you're on bridges. So don't overexpose to one builder. And on the other side, the most important one, do not pay your builder too much in advance. Do not get ahead of the payments, and it's that payment schedule is so important. Like making sure that what you've paid is roughly aligned with what works have been done is more important than anyone can ever imagine. If your builder's basically saying I need 50% deposit up front, and then it'll be weekly payments of £200 or £2,000 a week, it's not going to work. It's a bad relationship, because you are, as soon as you're overpaid on a project, if the builder has all the power, they have all the power, and you're basically at their whims, because you're like, oh, well, I'm 15 grand over. If I fire this builder now and go to someone else, I've lost 15 grand, and now you're in a really bad place. And it's happened to me, 2 or 3 times in different ways where I've somehow suddenly been overexposed in terms of payments, and it's horrible. And I just say, just really, really sternly, be hard line on how much you pay, and if the builder doesn't give you evidence of what they've done, if you can't see the work done, do not pay for it. Make sure you keep behind on the payments, because that's the main way to manage your builder risk.
It's really difficult as well, isn't it? Because if we're coming in new, we don't necessarily know what the protocol is in terms of this, and from my experience, all builders seem really, really nice when you're starting out. I don't think I've ever met any that you think immediately, you think, oh my God, what a cowboy, he's definitely going to rip me off. It's not till a little while later you find it out. So
you have to go in the relationship going, it's a really nice guy, I'm really looking forward to working with him, but I've got to assume he's a cowboy. Great. That's it. And as long as you assume he's a cowboy and act accordingly, then you're going to have a good time. But as soon as you just get too trusting up front, even with a builder you've worked with loads, you can still end up at that point where you're 20 grand down accidentally, and man, it hurts.
Yeah, I kind of think that sort of dealing with builders is a little bit like meeting my daughter's boyfriend. Yeah, it's like, yeah, he's a really nice guy at the moment. I don't fully trust him. He's a really nice guy at the moment, but I don't fully trust him. And it's fine. I've never used that analogy before. Maybe it's just something that's going on in my life. Yeah. But, hey, Dave, look, it's been amazing doing this today. We love catching up with you and Jackie, obviously. There's going to be people who are watching this or listening to this who are definitely going to want to kind of follow you guys a little bit closer. Obviously, when this goes in the magazine and on the website, we put in the relevant links. But if someone's listening to this on the audio podcast or watching it on YouTube somewhere, where can we send them to find out more?
Oh, just check. Where can you send them to? Do you know what? We're going to put something. I'm going to have to let you know off the back of this somewhere else on the show notes or something, because do you know what? I did not prep for this moment, and I'm actually not sure where it's best to send them to. I'll double check with the
I love
Jackie.
The fact that that's the one, but you weren't sure how to answer. What's your website address?
Admittedly, yeah, I mean, to be fair, I do know the website address. I just don't know if that's the best place. So the website is, of course, www.property-strategy.com. So if anyone wants to just find out more about us, that is a simple place to go. property-strategy.com. So yeah, you're completely right. I'm in the operations. I'm But it's been a pleasure.
When property investing podcasts go wrong, hey, maybe that's the next one. So, Dave, it's been amazing. It's been amazing catching up with you once again. So thank you for sharing. Your real life lessons and lessons of other investors. We couldn't do what we do at YPM without people like yourself sharing the very, very real life experience of what property investing is really like. So massive thanks from me, everybody listening, watching and reading this. Thank you.
Thanks, Ant.